Hi, I'm Jackie Short, and I'd like to welcome you to our video and podcast series, What is Creative Therapy? Today I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Diane Frey, who's a Professor Emeritus at Wright State University, Dayton, Ohio, where she's been a professor for 48 years. Dr. Frey has been in private practice as a psychologist for 45 years, and she's the author or co-author of 17 books and numerous journal articles and scholarly chapters. An internationally recognised speaker, Dr. Frey has delivered seminars in numerous countries and universities. She's appeared on ABC News 2020 as a subject expert on self-esteem and has been a guest speaker on NPR. Dr. Frey has served on the board of the Association for Play Therapy and the editorial board of the International Journal of Play Therapy. She was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by APT in 2008. Dr. Frey's youngest client was 2 years old and her oldest has been 85. With all of her clients, she's used play therapy as the major treatment modality. Welcome, Diane Frey. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in play therapy?
Well, thank you for inviting me. I actually had my first introduction to play therapy when I was working on my doctorate at the University of Illinois. I was taking a class from a psychiatrist, and he introduced the concept of using magic in play therapy. And I really thought, he doesn't know what he is talking about. But then he explained it, and I saw how relevant it was and important, and little did he know what fire he ignited in me, because since then I've written a book on using magic in play therapy, and I require of all my graduate students in play therapy to bring one or two magic tricks to class that have therapeutic metaphors embedded in them, and then we learn from each other.
Wonderful, wonderful. And in your years of working as a mental health professional and play therapist, what to you have been your greatest successes or your greatest moments of wonder, perhaps, in this field?
Well, I've worked with clients from age 2 years, 9 months to 85, and I've been using play therapy with all of them. And so I guess it's the wonder of how effective play therapy can be, those therapeutic factors in play therapy and how they apply. And sometimes I just question how people do therapy without using play therapy, because traditional talk therapy is just not so effective in many, many cases. So that the idea of all the therapeutic factors in play therapy and what a big change they can make in people and how much it can help them is really fascinating to me.
Yeah. Is there any client group you think play therapy wouldn't work with?
Yes. I had this little mini lecture I give to my class on the types of clients play therapy is most appropriate for. And then everyone asks, well, aren't there some clients for whom play therapy might not be so appropriate? And I think in the case where a client has a good deal of readiness, they're not resistant, they're not into denial, they're very verbal, they can articulate their feelings, they know what the problem is, and it's sort of like crisis management, and they want help right away. I once worked with a little girl who was 7. Her parents were traveling across our country with the military, and on the way from the West Coast to where I live in Ohio, the mother had a miscarriage, and the girl who was 7 witnessed this. And so when she got to Ohio, she wouldn't use the restroom. And so she was soiling herself in the classroom. This is not a good way to make friends. And so the teacher was very concerned. And so I thought, well, this is a very traumatic event. I probably have to use play therapy. And so I arranged some of my toys that I thought might be appropriate. And when she came in the room, she was kind of like right in my face. And she was saying, help me, help me. I know this sounds stupid, but I think I'm going to get flushed down the toilet too. And that's why she didn't want to use the restroom facilities. And rationally, she knew that that was impossible, but emotionally, she was so upset. And so she wasn't resistant. She wasn't into denial. She could articulate what she needed, and she really, really wanted help. And so then you don't necessarily want to go to something more symbolic. You could use like traditional talk therapy. But hardly any of most clinicians' clients are like that. Most have the other conditions I mentioned going on.
And in the work that you're doing at the moment, you've got a range of different interests. You're doing a webinar on love languages and how that connects with play therapy. Can you tell us a little bit about what that might be like?
Well, the literature indicates that the most important factor relative to effective change is the relationship in therapy. And so actually this afternoon, I was just reviewing some videos for the class I'm teaching on play therapy about relationships. And most people were talking about, well, how they establish a relationship is they try to be a good listener, which is good. They maybe try to play a game that the child might like, which is all right. But the most important thing is establishing the relationship. And in preparing for today, I made a list of the current play therapy theories. There is CCPT, ADPT, JAPT, CBPT, CPRT, FPT, AAPT, F-t, REBPT. And now all these alphabet soup theories don't make any difference unless you can establish a relationship with your client. And so many of those theories are evidence-based, but they only become effective if you are speaking the language of the child. And Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, has a lot to say about that. So he discusses how important it is to know your own love language, because people tend to use their own love language in terms of interacting with other people. And that might not be the love language of the other person. So first of all, you have to find out what your love language is. And then you want to find out what your client's love language is. And then the process is you choose from a myriad of play therapy techniques the ones that match your client's love language. And in that regard, everything goes much more smoothly and is much more effective. I've had parents in advance of their child visiting me, when I do the intake interview with the parents tell me, now my child probably won't separate from me, and I'll probably have to be like in the room. And I say, oh, well, I think it should be all right. And I don't know that you'll necessarily have to be in the room. And they really are doubtful. They come, I assess the love language of the child, and then they don't want to leave. Then they're having an argument with their parent about they don't want to leave, they want to stay here, they want to play more. And the parent just looks at me with astonishment. They're so quizzical. How did that happen? It happened through using these 5 love languages.
Yeah, a very powerful way to work. And we're looking forward to your webinar coming up very soon. You've also got an interest in peace and conflict resolution. Can you say a little bit about how that fits with play therapy?
Well, in fall at the Association for Play Therapy's annual conference, I'm going to present on the topic of using play therapy to teach people conflict management skills. And my experience has been that most people don't know too many conflict management skills, and fight or flight is the most common way they deal with things. And so the news is replete with examples of ineffective ways like people handle conflict. And so from the early 70s, I've been involved in the pursuit of teaching people better conflict management skills. And that's before I really applied a lot of play therapy techniques to the idea. But now I've put together a workshop that deals with that.
Fantastic. It's something we all need, I think, in every country of the world. So a very powerful thing to be offering. We hope that you might be able to offer something like that for us next year in a webinar format too. In your years of working as a play therapist, have there been any particular challenges that you faced?
Well, certainly there are a lot of challenges. Usually, since I'm in private practice and I'm a professor at the university, by the time someone gets to my private practice, they've often been to the school counselor, the school psychologist, other clinicians, and tried a number of different approaches. I sometimes get records on people that are like 3 or 4 inches thick of other therapists they've been to. And so some of those cases are very challenging. And so I find cases of selective mutism, for example, to be very difficult because the client isn't usually talking to you. And so I had a case one time where the child spoke fine at age 5, and then for 7 years didn't say a word to anyone, no one, even his parents or his siblings. And so that was a difficult case to work on. But since I've been doing play therapy for so long, I view those cases as a challenge. So eventually they all turn out fine, but some is more challenging maybe than someone who would dialogue with you or play, more things with you. So
I'd appreciate that play therapy would be the best way of engaging with someone who wasn't speaking anyway. If they weren't talking, then talk therapies weren't going to be working so successfully for them.
Yes, in fact, usually, as I mentioned, I get referrals like that from people who've been to other therapists, and I say, well, what did they do? They say, we don't know. We just took our child there, and then they came out of the therapy room, and then we made another appointment. I said, they didn't tell you about what to do? And I know that they don't know play therapy because they're not a registered play therapist. And so what they were doing, I have no idea. But I have a client now who's selectively mute, and she's been this way for 3 or 4 years. And I'm using colored sand with her as a technique, and she's participating in the sand tray a lot. And so I can see some progress being made with her, and I've only seen her about 4 sessions. So I think that's it. Play therapy is the only technique to use with people who are selectively mute.
Sure. Who have been some of the people who have influenced you most in this industry?
Well, that professor I originally had when I was in doctoral school, as I mentioned to you, he started my interest in play therapy. And then Dr. Charles Schaefer, who started the Association for Play Therapy along with Dr. Kevin O'Connor, has been a big influence on me. And then as I was on the board for quite a number of years, the board of the Association for Play Therapy, those other leaders in play therapy we would dialogue together, and so they would have an influence on me. And so that's been very helpful. I think a professional support group is very helpful to any clinician.
Are there any other tips you'd give those working in the play therapy industry in Australia?
Oh, well, about back to the 5 love languages, do you know the singing artist Bruno Mars? Yes. Well, he wrote a good song a while ago that everyone seemed to like called When I Was Your Man. And I thought, he doesn't know about the 5 love languages, but in this song he says, he's lamenting the fact that, for those of you who have not heard that song, that his girlfriend is no longer his girlfriend, and he's thinking about what he did wrong, and he says, I should have brought you flowers, which is a gift. And according to Gary Chapman, that's one of the love languages. And then he goes on to say, I should have held your hand, which is touch, which is another love language. I should have seen you more, which is quality time, which is another one of the love languages. And then he says, I should have taken you to parties, which would be an act of service because he knew she liked parties. And the only one he doesn't mention is words of affirmation. But I find it so interesting that song is very, very popular about all the things that he should have done, which are probably true. And he didn't know, like her love language. So in the webinar that we're going to do, we're going to talk first of all about how do you find out the love language of your client. There are ways to find out the love language of children, and then there is a game to find out that. And then there are ways to find out love language of teenagers, and there are ways to find out the love language of adults. And then once you find that out, then we're going to talk about, for each of those 5 categories, what might be some play therapy techniques. For example, quality time is one of the love languages. And so there's a play therapy technique that I like to use called Ticket to Speak. And so we're going to learn how to do that. There's another play therapy technique I like to use for people who like quality time called Hinged House. There's a play therapy game called Empathy Card. And we're going to learn about how to use that for people who really value quality time as a love language. Then one of the other areas of the 5 love languages are words of affirmation. And so I believe it was Mark Twain who said he could live 2 months on one positive piece of like feedback. And so people value positive feedback. And so there's a technique in that category called self-esteem bingo. There's one called toilet paper. There's one we're going to talk about with post-it notes, how you would use those for affirmations. Then moving on to the third category, gifts. So sometimes I give my clients who like gifts stickers. The young clients would really like stickers, and they'll work hard for stickers. Sometimes I give them object metaphors. It's very common for me to give them an object metaphor so they can take that with them, and it represents a particular thing we're working on in therapy or something I'd like them to remember. Sometimes for clients who like gifts, they can take home what they've made, or there is a technique called make a game. And then when we make it, then they can take that home. So it'd be a form of a gift. Of course, your interaction with them is the gift of time. So that would be another way of using gifts. Then acts of service. For people who like acts of service, I find out certain things that they really like. Like I had a client one time who told me she wanted a wet sand tray, and I only had a dry sand tray. So it was important to her. So I made sure I got a wet sand tray for the next time she came. So it would be an example of like acts of service or other things like that where you find out that the child or the adult client you're working with like particular things. Like they like markers more so than they like games or whatever. Then, I make sure I have some good markers for them or whatever. It's kind of considered to be like an act of service. And then for touch, the last area, I like this play therapy game called Cooperative Jumpers. And people who like touch really like that one. Of course, for people who like touch, it's good always to have stuffed animals around because they hold them while they're talking to you. And sand tray is a good technique for people who like touch. Clay, also thumb balls are a good idea where you have a ball about the size of a soccer ball and it's segmented to different areas, and then it might have different feeling in each area. You throw it at the other person. Wherever their thumb lands, they tell about a time they felt like that. And so people who like touch like that a lot. So those are some of the things we'd be talking about in the webinar.
Fantastic. That's a rich array of different methods and approaches to both engage with children who have different languages, but also ways of working therapeutically with them. So we're really looking forward to your webinar. Thank you very much. Is there anything else you'd like to say about play therapy that you feel like you've contributed to? Because you've contributed so much in so many areas for a long period of time, and we're very, very excited to hear more from you.
Well, I think one significant area of contribution of mine has been the emphasis on using play therapy with adolescents and adults. So when we first started establishing the definition of play therapy, when I was on the board, the definition said, this is an therapeutic approach for children. And I kept saying, no, you can use this with adolescents and adults, senior citizens. And so people say, well, yeah, but mostly like children. I'm like, no, it's very effective with adolescents, especially effective with adolescents who often come into the office. I'm not talking to you. I'm not even looking at you. And so I said, well, okay, let's play this game. And they don't think that that's cooperating. And so they play it, and then I find out a lot of things from them. So I think I argued that point steadfastly for quite some time until we changed the definition to say clients, not just children, which reminds me, in the webinar, we're going to discuss how to teach parents to learn their love language and inform them about the love language of their child so they can more effectively communicate with their child. Because I've seen any number of cases, and you probably have too, where the parent really does love the child, but the parent's way of communicating that is gifts. And the child's love language is touch. The child wants to be touched and hugged and cuddled, and the child thinks the parent doesn't love them, and the parent thinks, what? I love this child so, so much. And so we're going to mention some techniques that parents can use with children too.
Valuable. Thank you so much for your time for this interview today, and I know we're all looking forward to hearing more and seeing some of these methods demonstrated in the weeks coming. Thank you very much, Diane.
Thank you, Jackie.
Too young, too dumb to realize that I should have bought you flowers and held your hand. Should have given you all my hours when I had the chance. Take you to every party, 'cause all you wanted to do was dance. Now my baby's dancing, but she's dancing with another man.